right, we're going live. Just waiting on my computer to finish setting up. Welcome. Here we go. Okay, we should be good. Should be live streaming on Facebook. Okay. All right. Welcome, Anya. Just set up the live stream, so we should be good to go. Had one question that I'm going to answer first, and then I had some other things to share. So the question was, any tips on kind of getting used to using watercolor paints, because they are, I don't remember the word that was used, but I always say they're very unforgiving, right? Or, they're unpredictable. Anya, you might have some tips you could share in the comments or in the chat here, since you like paint. But with watercolor, I think, Adrienne, you asked the question about how to get used to watercolor. I mean, it is a lot of trial and error, and I'm not an expert in watercolor, but I do suggest, just like with any other art material you're getting used to just experiment with it, to just play with it. And Adrienne, I know that you had, there had been another time where you said that doing the scribble drawing on like some scrap paper or junk mail, like the back of an envelope, was helpful to you. And I think anytime we can do something like that, that's going to help us to have, I always say, like, I have an irreverence towards the art materials and the art sometimes. Anything that's going to help us to kind of take it down off that pedestal of like, this is a piece of fine art that has to look amazing. Anything that can get us in that mindset of it doesn't matter, I'm just experimenting, then do that. So even though like watercolor paper is ideal for watercolor because it's thicker and it really absorbs the water, like that's what it's made for, I would suggest experimenting on some other kind of paper, because the watercolor paper is expensive and it can feel like this is supposed to be a, like a real piece of art. So if that feels like too daunting for you, then just do it on any scrap piece of paper. A lot of times will use, like, this is like a cardstock. So that's going to be a little bit thicker maybe than regular like copy paper or an envelope, but it's still not going to feel like so official like a piece of watercolor paper. So just experiment. Yeah, again, I'm not an expert in watercolor. I know that professionals who really are good with watercolor and have been trained in that, they know how to layer it. So like you let it dry and then you can layer. But unlike, this is where the unforgiving part comes in, unlike acrylic paint or even just like tempera paint, like grade school kids use, you can't layer. So with tempera paint or acrylic or oil paint, it's layering in a different way. So you can layer and like cover something up, like totally obliterate it, right? With acrylic paint, like with what I've got behind me, it's like liquid plastic. So it's just going to totally cover up what you did before. And with the watercolor paint, those layers show through, which I think is so interesting. Gosh, and there could be so many metaphors there. Like, Adrienne, I would love to hear if you start just experimenting with it, sort of playing around with it. Like, I could see you coming up with lots of great metaphors for that, for that process, because again, like here we're focused on the process of the art making. So even if it looks like ugly, if it all turns to brown and muddy, like what can we learn from that process? What metaphors can we pull out of that layering process? Or what insight can we have into our emotions based on our reaction to like how it turned out? So yeah, I would love to chat more about that. We can talk more about that in the future, but just start by playing, just see what it does. Just make some lines, make some shapes. You can try kind of dripping on purpose or letting it, I like to hold with any kind of paint that's thin, to tilt my paper and let it run and see what it does. So just play with it and do it on whatever type of paper helps you feel less daunted by it. And if you have any other more specific questions, I'd be happy to answer about that. So yeah, that makes me want to play with watercolor paint more now. I haven't, I've been drawing more lately and haven't been painting quite as much. So what I want to do today is I'm going to share again some art that I did this week. And my emphasis here today is to remind you all that this process that we're learning, it's not just about checking tasks off of a list. So I know, I mean, that might sound the opposite of what I have communicated to you, but that's why I want to clarify. So yeah, you have these 8 sessions and all these tasks, right? So you're going through that in order, like I've directed you to, but this is also, it's more than checking off the tasks and then you reach session 8 and, oh, I'm done and I'm better, I feel good. It's about, again, the process and how we're growing and changing through this. So I want you all to be in the mindset of, even though I'm not like requiring you to do like extra art on the side on top of the art tasks in the sessions, I want you to be in this mindset of this is a regular practice that you're developing. Even if you don't consider yourself an artist, here I'm not gonna let you just do these sessions and then just like drop off and not continue this practice. So this is a practice that you're learning. It does not have to be daily. I do not do art daily. I try to at least weekly. This week I did it twice so far, and that was super helpful. And that I think is going to be a goal for me, just because I'm in this job role and because I have a flexible schedule. I think twice a week, just to check in with myself through the art, is something I need to be doing definitely at least once a week. So, but whatever that timeline looks like for you, how often you need to do it, that's individual. But I want you to be in the mindset that this is a regular practice that we're learning. So I'm looking at my notes here. I don't want to get off track. So in session 1, when I introduced this idea of the scribble drawings, of expressing our emotions through drawing, through just shape and line and color, and then the reflective writing element after that, I don't know if you all remember, but I spoke about it in terms of, we're usually kind of hanging out in our thinking brain. And so that's where we're going to start. So that's where I started the explanation of that exercise, was we're going to start with our thinking brain. So that's why I directed you all to start with looking at the list of feelings, to name your feelings. And then our goal was to move more into feeling our feelings, to get more in touch with our bodies, do the body scan, and then do the drawing, and get more insight about our feelings, right? So sometimes, well, oftentimes I think that a lot of us think we're accessing our emotions and in touch with our emotions, but really we're just thinking. So we're in that thinking kind of cognitive brain. So that's why I started it there. Now, so sometimes we're there, and then sometimes we are, of course, deeply in our emotions. So that's kind of another angle that I'm going to talk about today, is when we are experiencing heightened emotions, like we have just been triggered. Think about, whatever your triggers are, and I'll share in a minute kind of a trigger I had this week, and I was in my feelings. And then so I had to meet myself there. Instead of coming at it through my thinking brain, I had to meet myself in my, what I call my feeling brain, and go from there to try to get more to my thinking brain. So it's like we have this like rational, more logical side of our brain, the thinking brain, cognitive thinking. That's redundant. Cognitive is thinking, your brain. And then we have our emotional side, so the feeling brain. So ideally, this is like a mindfulness concept of like a Venn diagram of overlapping circles, where you have your rational mind and your emotional mind, and where they overlap is called your wise mind. So ideally, we want to have kind of both of those overlapping at the same time. But most of us have a tendency to be in one or the other. So for me, a lot of times I am in my emotional brain versus the rational brain. I'm in my feeling brain, not my thinking brain. But I do know what it's like to be more thinking and need to force myself to access my emotions. But we tend to hang out in one or the other. And the goal is that wise mind, that overlapping. So I'm going to give an example of earlier this week on Monday. I was kind of in my thinking brain. And I had read like this devotional that was emailed to me, and there was a particular scripture verse that was that really stood out to me, and it was a visual related to nature. And so I liked thinking about that, and it brought to mind some particular like emotional issues that I've been dealing with for a long time on different levels. And I have more distance from it now. So I'm not like really caught up in those emotions, but I have some distance from it. Like in last week's video, I talked about that concept of reflective distance. So these are some particular emotions kind of related to anxiety that that I'm used to. I'm used to dealing with. I have some distance from them. I have a lot of awareness about it, right? A lot of awareness there. So I'm approaching thinking about those things and ways I'm still growing through those emotions and those struggles in a more conscious, like rational mind, thinking brain, cognitive way. So I started with reading something and then I thought, oh, I'll draw kind of a representation of that the imagery from the verse was I had to do with nature. And so I drew that and then I started writing on my drawing, which is a cognitive thing, right? I wasn't just like scribbling emotions or like smearing paint. I was writing down things and it got to where I was sort of labeling the picture. I'm not going to show you a picture of that today. I'm going to show you something else. But I do want to, I think this would be something good to explore in another video. So, so I was literally like labeling my drawing and it was very concrete and very like representational, you know, the metaphors were all there and I was thinking through it. And then I was able to access some more emotions, some good feelings through doing some drawing with that writing. Okay. So that's an example of like what I have you do in session one, start in the thinking rational mind and move towards the emotions to become more in touch with them. Then, so I did that on Monday. And then yesterday, Wednesday, was it Wednesday? Yes. I was very much in my feelings. And I had had a trigger that had slowly like been building through the week. There, I'm not going to share all the details of this, but there's a new babysitter's house that I was dropping my daughter off at Monday through Wednesday this week. Today she actually went to school in person today and tomorrow. I'm excited about that. Some in-person days, but so driving to this babysitter's house is in an area of town where a man that I recently dated, well, kind of like last summer and early fall, I had dated him, and so I don't often go to this area of town. Um, and so probably the last time I frequented that area was when I was dating him. And I didn't even go there that often, but I kind of associated this area with him. And so I noticed that I was thinking about him more this week and feeling kind of sad about how things turned out. And just a lot of feelings, and those grew bigger each day this week. So Monday it was like, oh, I'm thinking about him and I can see why. Tuesday a little more emotional, and then Tuesday night I was really emotional about it. So by Wednesday morning when I went there again, I felt like I was on the verge of tears and I was irritated with myself and with those feelings because I did not want to be feeling that. I was like, why am I not over this? Like, what's wrong with me? So I wanted to ignore it. I remember I went and ran an errand and I was just thinking about it more like in the car. And I was like, oh, I have to address this. It's gotten to the point where I have to address it because I feel like I'm on the verge of crying. And so when I got to work again, I have the privilege of having a flexible schedule most mornings. So I was able to just stop what I was doing and spend a few minutes addressing those emotions. I know we don't all have that. We can't address it in the moment. But as I'm explaining this process, I want you all to think about how you can address it as soon as possible. So what I did first was I sort of made myself start crying because I knew it was going to come anyway. So I just like kind of forced the beginning of it and then the floodgates opened. And that is such a physical, like visceral, like release from our body. It's a cathartic release of emotions. And so oftentimes that's something that I need to do. I'm a very emotional person. I need to let it out through crying. So sometimes if you can't stop and like do artwork about your feelings right away, you can at least like go in the bathroom and cry. You know, there's one little thing you can do. And then I want you to think about how you can plan a time to actually sit down and process your feelings more. All right. And it doesn't have to be through art, but I'm going to speak in those terms because that's what I'm teaching here. So plan a time. It could be during your lunch break. It could be at the end of the day, or you might have to wait until before bedtime. But I think it's helpful to, after you experience some trigger, some big emotion, to be able to let it out in some small way, cry, go outside and take a few deep breaths, walk a little bit if you can, come back in, something small, and then set a goal of a time of when you can address it more fully, because otherwise it's going to keep coming up. Like I noticed it Monday, a little more Tuesday, a lot more Tuesday night, and then Wednesday I couldn't deal with it anymore. So it's going to keep coming, and we need to at least plan a time to address it if we can't do it right then. So then I started drawing. I think I'm going to switch and screen share so I can show you all my artwork. I didn't take too many. Okay, hold on a second. Trying to do a screen share. All right. I didn't take too many photos, but I do have a little bit of a progression here to show you all. So this is what I drew first. So I cried, I felt better. And I had thought I would sit down and like read something inspirational, but I was like, no, I'm not in that thinking brain place. I need to just express myself. So I cried and I felt better. And then I drew first this big orange oval. I think I might read you guys my writing too. And what I did here was I wrote some, I drew some, then I wrote. So I drew this all at once. Um, and then I did some of the reflective writing, like the witness writing. I witnessed my artwork. And then I drew some more and changed it based on what the drawing told me and what insight I got. So that's another way we can sort of play with this process as you can go back and continue working. I'm just going to read what I wrote here. I haven't read it since yesterday morning, but hopefully it makes some sense. So I wrote, I can't breathe, which that sounded so dramatic and I almost didn't write it, but you know, back to that no judgment zone, the no judgment piece of this, you just write it. Okay. Nobody else has to see it. I tend to write really cliched, dramatic things in my writing. But I just go with it because I've learned that's best to just let it be. So I can't breathe. It feels heavy. I don't like it. The darkness. So the darkness was representing that kind of that sadness, that grief I was having. I almost didn't include it in the drawing. I almost didn't include the black. I almost said no, go away, but that's why I'm here to look at it. I went to a place I don't like to go. And when I first wrote that, I meant my emotions. I went to a place emotionally I don't like to go, but then it turned into talking about I mentioned the area of town where he lives. So I went to that place and I didn't want to go there physically because it brought up the emotions. So I thought about the hurt and cried and let it out. And then I made this orange oval. So I started out just very matter-of-factly describing what's there. And I turned on music and I felt good for a moment. Then the black came. Started adding that black even though I didn't want to. The color of his blame and shame and insults. Now this person was not narcissistic, not abusive, but had poor boundaries. And so when I set boundaries, he was very hurt. And this was the healthiest I'd ever been in a relationship. I was actually setting boundaries. I'm proud of how I behaved there in that relationship. But he was hurt by my boundaries because he saw it as me pushing him away and me being cold. And he even thought that I was behaving in toxic ways because he was so triggered by my boundaries. He wanted to be enmeshed and no boundaries and just very much like I used to be, just very over functioning and trying to just be like so just our identities enmeshed, you know, with the other person. And I was setting healthy boundaries. And everyone else in my life agrees that I was setting healthy boundaries, but he was triggered by that. So he did insult me a lot and say some cruel things as we were breaking up. And so I said, so that's kind of where this hurt and grief is coming from. And I said, how do I look at them and then move past them? So how do I look at the blame and shame and insults and move past them? That's what I asked the drawing. And then the answer that it gave me, it said we, as if the drawing and I are we, which is a little weird, but okay. It said, we highlight them for what they are. Not condemning him, but looking at the reality of his behaviors and who I am and what I need and deserve and want. I can tell it what it is and where it belongs. So that darkness, that sadness, I can step back, have that distance and see what it is and see where it belongs. Like I can make sense of it. I can move it out, usher it out with my blue me, in parentheses, my identity, traveling right through the yellow light of truth. So what I did here was I saw, move my mouse here, there's this, I saw this opening of this yellow below the darkness. So I thought I can move it out, like I can usher it out. So okay, arrows go this way, yeah. So it's a subtle difference, but I added this blue around the black on both sides. And I added some blue around the orange circle as well. and I'm starting this opening here. So I can usher it out. I can release it. And I'm in control. That's what's happening here. And also, if you notice, what I'm doing is I'm gradually getting more into my thinking, rational brain. As I said, I can look at it and see the reality of his behaviors, what was going on. So I'm moving from that emotional state into that more rational state, and hopefully the wise mind in the middle. So I can lead it out. It can leave because the truth of who I am and who you are. So now I transitioned to my we in my brain was not me and the drawing, but it was me and God, me and my creator, because that's a part of the process for me. I know we talked about that more in last week's video. If you haven't listened to that, you can go back and review that. So now it's kind of like a prayer. The truth of who I am and who you are, meaning my creator, can tell it to go. We can tell it to go away. We can decide. I have control over it. I allow it in and I can release it. And then I ask the drawing, what else do you want me to know? Let's see. Here, I'll go ahead on to the last picture. So at some point in here, I stopped and I drew these arrows as well to really show it leaving. So I can tell the black where to go. I have that control. So what else do you want me to know? I asked the drawing. And then it said the black can be fuzzy and pretty on the edges. I kind of liked this texture here on the edges. It's not all bad. I learned from it. It's inevitable that I'll have some black weighty feelings in life. So again, this is me being more rational or more wise. It's inevitable this is going to happen. Instead of just like bawling and not knowing what to do with myself, I'm looking at it rationally. It's normal. It feels so heavy and stuck in the middle, but it can flow if I release it. I do have the choice. So I have the choice to release it. And so I felt really good after this. It doesn't mean that some of those feelings aren't going to come back, but I felt so much more in control and in charge here. So let me look at my notes here to kind of conclude. So back to that idea that we meet ourselves where we are. So I was in my emotions. So I met myself there, did what I needed to do to release the emotions. When we're more caught up in our thoughts about stuff and we're feeling kind of a little stunted emotionally, like we need to access our emotions and figure out what's going on with them, then we can start with the writing or with the with the body scan or with choosing an emotion word off of a list. We can start there. And grow to be more in touch with our bodies and with our feelings. Let's see. Okay. And kind of a last question for you all. I'll probably post this as a written question in the group within the next few days is like, how is this work translating into your all's personal lives and your actions? So like for me, like I said, I want this to become a regular practice for you all, like I do. And whether it's still just working on the sessions right now, or whether you kind of add in some other times to just scribble again to revisit that practice, I want this to be kind of a regular way to check in with yourself and process things. So from there, though, we don't just want to leave it as, oh, I got these insights and I have a warm, fuzzy feeling, or I feel like I released this sadness and now I'm good. I'm curious, like what actions we're taking out of this. So for me, an action that's coming out of this is, well, first that I'm more mindful. So I went back Wednesday afternoon to pick up my daughter in that same neighborhood that had been triggering to me, and I was mindful of the fact that I could feel triggered. So I was already kind of prepared ahead of time. So that was helpful. So that was kind of like an action, like I was putting into practice what I had learned and what insight I had gotten through the art that day. So I knew it was coming. Another example of an action is to kind of be aware of thoughts when I'm thinking about this person that I know, it's not helpful for me to just keep thinking about him. And so I can stop those thoughts. a more practical, tangible thing is like not go look at his social media. Like I don't follow him anymore on social media. I don't need to go be curious and look, which is something that I actually did do earlier this week when I was starting to think about him because I was driving in that area of town. So I don't need to do that. That's a very tangible action. And that doesn't mean I'm ignoring the feelings, but it means I'm if you can avoid being triggered, like if you're doing stuff to trigger yourself, then yeah, like avoid it, you know. There's a difference between that and just avoiding your feelings. So I'm not avoiding the feelings that come up, but I don't need to make it worse by choosing to do something that's going to trigger it more. I need to be focused on my life and where I'm moving forward. Yeah, so I'm curious for you all. You can put a comment here, or again, or like I said, I'll post it in an actual question in the group soon. How is this work translating into your life, into your actions? So what are some good things coming out of it? Some changes you're making, and if you haven't gotten to that point or haven't thought about that, this is your chance to think about it. Maybe tell us what's a change you could make. What's a way this could translate? So yeah, hopefully I explained that all right. That could look a lot of different ways, so we can chat about that. I'm actually at my time or like before my time. I don't usually do that. So that's great. I'll stop screen share real quick. Yeah. So thank you all. And any comments or questions on this, please let me know. We can continue talking more about this topic in the future. I think there's some more that I could say about this concept of meeting ourselves where we are with the artwork in our emotions or in our thinking rational mind. Have a good day.